Welcome to the SDG 12 GAMIthon seminar. I'm Paulina Wong from the Science Unit. Today, what I'm going to cover will be about sustainable food choices and consumption. Because I know you guys will be focusing on SDG 12, so I will quickly introduce about 4 aspects, which is the first one will be the problem and the challenges about the food, and then how can we actually practice a sustainable food system throughout from farm to table. And then I think my focus today will be on the consumer choices and also the green label system. All right, so the problem in here right now is about the world population will be expected to increase up to like 10 billion by 2050. So now we have about like 8 billion, and then by 2050, we're expecting there will be 10 billion. So the question is, how can we actually feed the 10 billion people? If we're looking at the current system right now, this is the global land use that we had right now with the 29%, and then we can look at about like 71% out of the habitable land that we had, more than 50% of it is actually contributed towards the agriculture. Basically, the food is coming from 50% of the land. And then you can see that if we're looking at the land use system in here, there are actually other, for example, the land that is being used for developing powers, and then also other production, for example, because of the emissions or the urban development in here, we basically having further less of the forest land. And we all know about like the forest is important towards the climate change, towards in mitigating the global climate change and carbon dioxide. So in that case, if we need to feed more people, it means we may need to double up. And then also the demand of the people's income are getting higher, they're entering middle classes, so that will be a greater portions of people now will spend on expensive stuff, for example, like buying more meat and then consuming more animal-based food. And particularly just now I've mentioned about like more land might be devoted to growing biofuels, supporting biomaterials and such. They will be growing more plants and fungi, particularly in the developed countries. So if we add all into it, now I think we had a serious land competitions and also I think land abuses all over the world. So if we're looking in here, it's like how can we actually use the same amount or even less amount of land for growing edible crops, feeding the livestock and producing all we need. This is actually a great pressure. So now I think we might not be spending too much time today to argue for that, because I think that will take me one day to try and to work on that. So, but if you're looking at the food issues right now, because with almost of the 50% of the land, we are actually supplying about like 80% of the meat dairy globally for all the populations, if you're looking at the protein in here. So now our question will be, how can we trying to minimize the food insecurity issues? And also I think mostly most of the discussion will go into like how can we address the food loss and also particularly the food waste through the while we are promoting the sustainable food practices. But now I think if we're looking at the whole food practices in here, we normally will be looking at like, for example, from the farming level, perhaps we can have like a more resilient crop breeds. We can improve the feeding practices. We might be using better soil and water management. We want to reduce emissions through like better fertilizers. And then while we're harvesting, we might be able to like use less machineries, using a more energy efficient way, and then perhaps like less food waste. I think this is what we've been having all the time. And also at the production level, we might be able to, for example, looking at like in terms of packaging, we might be able to reduce the overall consumption, and then using less water. And even there will be like, for example, introducing green label system, green certifications and incentives and such. So in that case, it might be a way that we can go for it. And then in terms of transportations, of course, if more people will be able to consume local products, or sometimes like Hong Kong, we rely on import food. Can we actually adopt a more cleaner options, like a non-fossil fuel options? These are the different issues that we can discuss in all the different stages. So in terms of retail as well, less packaging, and then perhaps like, And also I think in the table, well, I think mostly we discuss about like in terms of food preparation, can we reduce the waste, and also using a more sustainable food cooking, less food waste, cooking a smaller portions, and yeah, there's plenty. I think I can leave this question to you to decide like in each of the stage there will be a lot that we can do in order to switch towards the food practices. But now today, what I want to cover in here will be on this part. It's between the retail and up to the consumers, about the consumers, about the consumptions, about the choices, about the consumptions in here. All right, so if we're looking at the choices or the consumptions, this is particularly looking at about the importance of it. So if we're looking at, I think encouraging people to take a more sustainable food behavior, that might be the ultimate goal, instead of only like reducing food loss, reducing food waste. This is another way as like changing the diet. So there's a lot of literature actually encouraging, this will be encouraging the change of the food behavior or the consumption behavior will be an important step towards the overall lowering the greenhouse gas emissions. And then, but unfortunately, I think a lot of them related to, like, for example, asking people to adopt like plant-based diets, buying food with lower carbon footprints, recycling the food waste. That there's a lot of literatures that have actually covered on it, and it's proved it to be effective, significant. But unfortunately, I think food choices is actually quite difficult to change. I think people's individual motivations, for example, like their own taste, because of the cost, and then the preferences, social norms, and also sometimes it's limited by the environment as well. For example, in the wintertime, this is the only food that you can consume there. And then so it is, in fact, tricky, and it's not easy to deal with, right? So I think there's actually a lot of promotions about if we can actually look at like, well, doing campaigns like Green Mondays, and then, for example, encouraging you to consume more like discounts on plant-based things. It might not be very effective, I would say. It's like at least there might not be any substantial changes towards the behavior in here. So that might be another psychological mechanisms that needs to further explore. But I think in here, there are some interventions that I think I would like to introduce a bit, particularly on the environmental labels, because at some point, if the people might be able to conduct a behavioral change, I think that relates to knowledge as well. Relates to knowledge, relates to their mindsets, relates to their beliefs as well. If this becomes a norm, like buying plant-based food, then perhaps there will be a motivations in the coming future. So today I want to cover a bit more about the eco-labels. So I think a lot of you should have seen all this type of, like, for example, these are the labels for recycling materials. These are the labels for the organic food, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, the labels itself is actually trying to identify the products or services that is or they provided a certification system. So in that case, we would know, or it would help the consumers to make a better decision. At least when I check on the label, if this food had this label, I would trust that this product or this service will be a bit cleaner compared to the others. And also for those labels in here, it will provide you like the information behind the wall, basically like what are the negative environmental causes. And also I think for the business, it is also a motivation. Is like in that case, they will be having a measuring performance about how did they actually during the manufacturing stages. So I think this is a important aspect that we can explore as well. So if we looking at the environmental labeling, they've also got ISO standards. But I would like to stress, emphasize in here is that for this ISO standards in here in the 14,000 series, they are guidance. They are not a certification standard somehow. They were a guidance encouraging the business, or so if you're looking at the different standards in here, mostly they will be, we normally identify it as like type 1, 2, and 3, that is like different types. So it's really depends on their operation level. And then some of them, they might be voluntary, some of them, they might be self-report, and then, or some of them, they involve the third party for the certification, for certifying. So there's like different standards in here. So yeah. So if we're looking at the overall eco-labels in the whole food industry, this is one of the timeline that I can. So I think this is more popular in here for the organic labels that we can see, particularly in Hong Kong as well. And also they are actually much more label. But now I would personally think there's far too much label that I am actually getting quite confused already. But at least this is a good encouragement about us, like in that case, we can at least driving the business to do better because they want to get this label. And then sometimes it's like if they have this label in here, they can sell for a higher price. So sometimes, but also they are like news and stuff about like fraud cases. It's like they're putting a label, but in fact the product doesn't up to the standard. So there are actually different stories going on. But now let's come back to Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, we've also had a scheme called Green Label Scheme that were launched in about year 2000, I think. And then for this green label in here, I'm not sure whether you've seen this before or heard this before. They've also adopted the 140L24 type 1 label guiding principle. So they've actually involved in third-party practices. And then so this is the code of practice that they have adopted in Hong Kong. And then so the green labels that they had is like they were trying to set the environmental product criteria for most of it doesn't only apply to food, it applies to all products, all services, and such. And then in that case, it at least encourage all the products in Hong Kong will be in a what they call a good environmental performance. At least they will not totally dirty, if you put it that way, right? And then also I think it's important, particularly important for the consumers to recognize. So if there's two products now on my hand, they were same price, if I had a better idea, or if I have the knowledge, or as part of the education, or if you had that big label on top of the veggies, this is a green label, this has a green label, and then it might able to remind. So just now I mentioned about one of the ways of doing it is like visual aids, or a props or posters and such, trying to promote this. It might help the consumers. Sometimes we keep reminding them, or when there's two products that they're deciding, they might take the benefit of having a label in there. So this is able to helping the consumers to make the better choices. And also there are other like certifications as well. This is particularly developed for the organic products, aqua farms, and then I think since the establishment, they've already recognized this like more than 100 farms, aqua farms, processing standards and such. So they are one of the certification system in Hong Kong. So if you see this label in here, you can actually go ahead. So there's actually, today is, I suppose not to say today, but today is the Earth Day. And then so I quickly look at this, a survey that they have done recently because of the Earth Day in here. So they actually did a questionnaire about, let's say, how well-known of the labeling systems in Hong Kong. So this is a fresh result that they have just got from them this week. Is about for one, I think it's in general only 1/3 of the people in Hong Kong that have heard about the eco labels. And then also out of the age group in here, there's only about like if you look at like the youth and perhaps the how familiar you are, most of them were not. All right, so this is the other way around, not aware of the Ferris label. The youth, they're not aware. The elderly, they're not aware. So I think the mostly is more about in the middle age, where they might be a bit more concerned about health, and then so this might be something that we have to think about. Perhaps we need more promotions and educations and such. And then, of course, other practices and actions that we can take in here is, for example, in terms of the eating habits, definitely less meat. I think this is, I think a lot of people already have this concept in here, but other than only eating less meat, perhaps we can consume a plant-based food, for example, like plant-based burgers and such. It might be more healthier, more cleaner to the environment. And then in terms of seafood as well, we need to be careful with the seafood as a wild seafood, like the sources of it. This will be important as well. And then also a couple of actions. For example, if we can get food from local farms, I think now we've got a lot of TV or campaigns or shopping groups that actually bought all this stuff from farms. So I think I've joined those shops, the farms as well, as like you pay $100 per week and then they will provide you a box of veggies. So it's really exciting. And also if you're living in villages houses, you might be able to consider growing your own food. It doesn't have to be like, you know, a big plot or something, but like if you grow your own tomatoes, grow your own green onions, something small, or herbs and such, I think that will be a very good start. And then of course, I think one thing that I would really recommend is to support those business. You might, well, I know sometimes it's not easy for us to grow our own food, but yeah, for those restaurants or business that they are adopting a sustainable practice, I think it is worth for us, particularly in Hong Kong, to as an encouragement, as they need our support, basically. All right. So, well, for example, those restaurants that they pledged to reduce their food waste while they were preparing the food. I've heard some of the restaurants is like they will throw those food that looks ugly, but actually it is nothing to do with the quality of it, but it's just not nice to go on the plate. Or some of the cafes or restaurants, they will announce, they will use menus or design menus with local harvests and then using local products and such. And then also the other business, for example, like we would call it now shop naked. I've seen most stores in Hong Kong either selling the food that is going to expire very soon, or is by bulk order, so you can bring your own packing, own bottles and such. And actually, I think they've got more choices. So I personally, I really love it. So yeah, these are some of the business that we can think about to show support to all those. And I think that will help you to influence your friends, influence your colleagues, influence members in Hong Kong to actually consume a more sustainable. So I think this needs time, but also individual actions. There's a lot that we can do in here to help the environment in Hong Kong. So I think what we've covered in about like 20 minutes today is a bit of summary in here. How can we actually transition to a more sustainable food system in here, from different stages, from farming stage, from consumption stage, and then particularly the practices that we have. And also like a couple of interventions that we had in here, very important I covered today, is the green label systems, and also the official prompts in here is that if the label is right on top of the product, it might remind the people about, or that would become their decisions while they were deciding what to buy. So in that case, like information campaign, particularly is education, a bit more promotions in the shopping mall, sometimes adding a discount to it, that would help. And then also I think the encouragement in here for the sustainable food choices and consumptions will be very important. So hopefully this is a short sharing that I had today for the seminar in here. Anything, you can always email me, and good luck to your competition. Thank you.